All right, well, welcome everyone. My name's Tim Woods, and I'd like to welcome you to our Market Ready training program on quality assurance and food safety. This is part of our Master Course webinar series that we've been doing on advanced topics for Market Ready business functions. As most of you know, the Market Ready program is about training producers to move into commercial market channels and looking particularly at some of the more challenging business functions that buyers are really looking for suppliers to be up to speed with. We looked last time at the issue of insurance, and if you happen to miss that insurance and risk management webinar, I encourage you to go back and check that out. But today I'm really excited to have this chance to look at this issue of food safety and quality assurance. It's certainly one of those topics that comes up at the top of the list as we're talking with different buyers, whether it's grocers, school food service directors, buyers in the restaurant or wholesale community. And we're very fortunate. One of the things I love about this webinar format is that we're able to bring in some outside expertise from really all over the place. And we've got three fantastic resource people joining us here today. Dr. Paul Vijayakumar is here at the University of Kentucky, works in our food science program, and has been implementing a lot of extension-related activities around the issue of food safety, does process review and other things connected with our Food Systems Innovation Center. We're also very fortunate to have Annette Wizlacki with us from the University of Tennessee. And I've had a chance personally to sit in on some of her food safety programs that she does with the Tennessee producers down there. Just some outstanding resources that Annette has developed. We're very fortunate to have her join us. So welcome, Annette. And also for Betsy Bin, and we're also very excited to have Betsy join us here from Cornell, part of the Produce Safety Alliance that will be a big part of helping many of us as we're trying to navigate forward through the Food Safety Modernization Act. And so with that, just a couple of sort of typical thank you notes to our special sponsors. We've always had a good working relationship, of course, with our Department of Ag, and we're part of the UK Cooperative Extension system here as well, the FSIC program and our K-Card partners. And of course, this whole program is partly funded through a specially crop block grant program that we had for this. So with that, I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar. Welcome to our special guests. And Alex, I guess I'll turn it over to you. We've got a series of questions that we're going to go try to work our way through in this hour to look at some of these really important issues about how do producers get themselves market ready in this issue of food safety and quality assurance.
Thanks, Tim. And thank you, everyone, for making some time out of your busy schedules to come out and join us for this webinar. Betsy, I understand that you work with the Produce Safety Alliance. Can you kind of elaborate on some of your goals and activities and kind of how producers can get some resources from PSA as they kind of navigate through the different food safety questions?
Sure. All right, so just to give a 30-second background of the Produce Safety Alliance, it is funded through a cooperative agreement between USDA, FDA, and Cornell University. And we were tasked back in 2010 with developing a curriculum for small and very small farmers who may be involved in either implementing the Food Safety Modernization Act's produce safety rule because they were subject to it, or for those that may end up having to align with it because of buyer demand. We know now that the rule is final, which of course we didn't know in 2010, that many of the growers are exempt or excluded from it depending on their size, their markets, and what have you. But we were tasked with developing materials to help them understand what was in the rule as well as how to begin implementing it. So that's sort of the formative part of the Produce Safety Alliance. fast forward to the development of the curriculum. In the Food Safety Modernization Act's Produce Safety Rule, there is a provision, 112.22c, that says that a grower or a responsible party from a farm must attend training that is recognized as standard by the FDA. And the Produce Safety Alliance has developed a curriculum that meets that requirement. So in terms of resources that people can get from the Produce Safety Alliance, they can attend a grower training or a train the trainer session to learn how to offer this information to growers. Beyond the standardized curriculum, the Produce Safety Alliance is also developing several other educational documents to help growers either understand things that are in the Produce Safety Rule or just support the implementation of practices on their farms to reduce food safety risks, mostly microbial risks that are on the farm. So we have information on sanitizers. We have information on determining if you're excluded or exempted from the rule. And we have other materials that we are working on. In addition to the stuff that the Produce Safety Alliance is working on, we also have a collection of materials from around the country that our collaborators have developed to help growers implement food safety practices. All of those can be found at the producesafetyalliance.cornell.edu.
Well, thank you very much for that. All right, we'll go ahead and get started with some of our questions. So what are some of the major mistakes vegetable and produce growers make as it relates to food safety? Annette, would you like to touch on that?
Area on a farm, from grower training through water and biological amendment use and so on. But I think as a general mistake that people make, I think they have limited time and limited workers on their farm. So it comes down to trying to rush through things instead of doing it the right way and really being careful in what they're doing and how they're doing it. And, you know, I always tell growers here that you're doing at least 90-95% of the things right for food safety, but it's that one little thing that you didn't realize was putting you at risk that can make a difference in your operation. So just taking the time to really think about the way you're doing things and doing them properly, I think is a big one in every aspect of your operation.
Paul, do you have anything further you'd like to add to that?
Yeah. Okay, so from my experience, one thing that I see is growers asking, thinking that only certain size or large size growers need to ensure food safety. I'm a small grower, I'm a medium sized grower, I just do farmers market. I don't know what I have to do with food safety, or should I document something? Or sometimes growers thinking that it's too much when they listen to the terms audit, then they listen to the term food safety plan or food safety manual. Sometimes that makes them feel apprehensive that it's beyond their capacity to think about building a food safety plan, or it's tough to go through taking care of the regular food safety stuff. But I have some examples that really help them, encourage them to do this. When you talk about a food safety plan and a food safety manual, it might be a collection. It could be a collection of things that they're already implementing it on the farm. For example, a grower who's in Eastern Kentucky who might have a problem with wildlife visiting farms, especially deer, might be having a method to document or track the animal in the farm. So whichever method they have to track the animal or trace the animal on the field is part of the food safety plan. And for example, another example is the kind of water they use on the farm. If they're using municipal water, all that the GAAP audit or even the basic food safety plan requires is for them to document that certificate from the municipality that says they use water that has been tested. So things like that will let them know that they might be doing some of the stuff that they already think, it's too much for them. So these are some of the practices that they might already be working on in their farm. Just that it's worded different. When it's a food safety plan, it's a collection of things that they are doing to ensure the food that they produce is safe.
Right. Thank you. So on to our next question. How can producers best protect themselves from spreading foodborne illnesses? And we'll kind of stick to our produce grower scenario with this and kind of elaborate on, you know, some of the things that people can do to protect consumers from getting a foodborne illness. And Betsy, would you like to touch on that for us?
Sure. I think when I read this, the most obvious one is going to come down to worker training, hand washing. As with all GAPs, right? Water matters, manure matters. All of that matters in the production field. But when I think about the low-hanging fruit, and I think about an area that is easy to implement, easy to understand, and you know, the biggest bang for your buck, it's going to be hand washing, making sure everybody in the operation is trained to wash their hands. And you know, if you're going to ask me for one, that's going to be my number one.
All right. Annette, would you like to add anything in there?
Sure. I know in East Tennessee, and I suspect it's probably the same in Eastern Kentucky, we have a lot of folks that use surface water sources for irrigation. And we know that surface water, while it might be your cheapest option, can have the tendency to be riskier than if you're using a well or some other source of water. And water, as Betsy mentioned, is one of those things that can spread pathogens very quickly and ubiquitously across your field. So it's very important to know your water source and be confident that what you're applying that water to, either through irrigation or pesticide sprays, isn't going to put you at risk for spreading a foodborne illness.
All right. Paul, would you like to add anything?
Oh, yes. Something simple that I make in my GAAP training that I cover is for specialty crops for growers is focus on your product. Know your product, know your farm. Focus on know your product very well. What's your product, and what is the primary risk associated with your product and your farm? And that's to me key in developing procedures to tackle those food safety risks.
So we just had one of our first questions come in from our guests. What are the best low cost water testing options for small farms? And anybody can.
Okay, so if you're just talking about availability of water testing, most water tests are going to run between $30 and $50. In terms of labs, you'll see opportunities to have CoalAlert, which tends to be more widely available, and that will give you an MPN, most probable number result. This is Betsy, by the way. I did want to jump in here, though. If you're talking about compliance with the Food Safety Modernization Act, currently you have to use method 1603. And we are hoping that there will be more information related to this coming out into guidance, and people still have plenty of time to get in compliance with water. I don't want to jump into the PSR, but I just want to say if you've never tested your water, just getting a water test that's a quantified generic E. coli number is a good direction to go in. But if you've been testing your water and you're thinking you're going to move in the direction of establishing a microbial water quality profile, you just need to know that right now, method 1603 is where you should look to, and that you don't need to start now. You can wait for some of this to sort itself out moving forward.
And just to add a little bit to that, we've done a little digging of where our growers in Tennessee could get that done. We don't have a lab that can do that method in Tennessee, but we called around to folks in Florida as well as Waters Lab in Georgia, and we did call Waters Lab in Kentucky. who will not do that method that Betsy mentioned, the 1603. Waters Lab in Georgia will, and they'll actually do it for $15 a sample. So that's the cheapest we've ever seen it.
Yeah, but the problem is that that method has a 6-hour hold time from pull at the source to delivery to the lab. You have to get it there in 6 hours. So if you're within 6 hours of that lab, that's a good option. But if you're not, you cannot mail those overnight and have that be a valid test.
I think the labs are going to need some education then, because the ones in Florida seem like they thought overnighting it was no problem.
Yeah, that is a problem. Overall, this is a huge problem, which is why I'm not recommending people start getting a lot of water samples until we see guidance. And there's a lot of research going on right now to show equivalency in other methods, which I think is going to be the appropriate answer. But until it is the answer, I think we should all just, if you're sampling your water right now to meet your audit requirements, you should keep doing that. If you've never tested, I would get, at least a couple of samples this year, even if it's cold alert, to have an idea of what your water source is like. But until some of this sorts itself out, I would not start building my microbial water quality profile.
All right.
Which probably just confused everyone if they have no idea what we're talking about.
Well, I think at least now they have a good grasp of how important water quality is with some of the stuff that they're doing, and kind of giving some direction on where they can go to best get some answers. So that's some really good stuff. But this is probably one of our most common questions from some of our Market Ready graduates is, what exactly is the difference between GAAP certification and GAAP training? And Annette, you can go ahead and fill us in on that if you'd like.
All right, so a GAAP training is just going to be any sort of workshop or conference you might attend that's talking about good agricultural practices. So any class you would attend in that regard. We talk about GAAP certification, that's often used synonymously with having a GAAP audit done. So that's a third-party process where you have someone come in that inspects your farm and make sure you're in compliance with the good agricultural practices. And there's a cost associated with that.
Paul, would you like to elaborate on
Yeah,
that?
I think what Annette said is all there is to it. I think that's an excellent definition of what she put together. The difference between GAAP certification and GAAP training. But from a Kentucky perspective, the problem is we see the term GAAP being conspicuously used with everything related to food safety, especially our basic sampling certificate. We call that GAAP training. And I'm sure most of you are aware of the sampling certificate program for farmers market for growers issuing raw samples at the farmers market. You will have to go through this training, video training, which is also called a GAAP training. Now we're trying to work to change that term to a farm-focused food safety training or something like that, so that you can differentiate between the GAAP, actual GAAP audit, and the third-party GAAP audit, and the GAAP and the training. So as far as Kentucky goes, I have a publication that I've sent to Alex, and hopefully most of you received that speaks about the difference between what third-party GAAP is and the sampling program, and then the Food Safety Modernization Act. So it's key to understand what Annette just mentioned. Any farm that's gone through implementing a food safety plan and gone through a third-party audit, which is a voluntary program, which is a by requirement to sell wholesale, is typically called a GAAP certified farm. A GAAP training, like again Annette mentioned, is a workshop. For example, the third-party GAAP audit preparatory training that I have in Kentucky prepares the growers to go through how to go through the GAAP audit process. Well, I've had growers go back after the workshop and tell me, so now can I sell wholesale after I've sat there the whole day training? The answer is no. This is a training that prepared you to go through the audit and essentially didn't give you the certification.
So one of our questions from our audience that just came in is, Are there any affordable audit options for small farms under $20,000 who can't afford GFCI certifications?
GFSI, I would
Yes,
perceive.
I'm sorry.
Okay, GFSI. I would say we're not Kentucky. We're not advocating one over the other, one third party over the other, but we predominantly the training that we have, the GAAP audit preparatory training we have is based on the USDA GAAP audit. So far, by what we've seen and KDA's information, USDA GAAP audit is the cheapest and simple and straightforward. So that's probably the option that I would suggest. And going further, there's a new group GAAP program by USDA that started April of this year, 2016, where a group of growers, this was primarily targeted towards the small size growers who can group together and get a group audit group GAAP certification through USDA program. So that's another option. And in fact, I have another newsletter that I and Audrey, the director of the group GAAP program, wrote together, and I can forward that to Alex, and you can feel free to send that to all the participants, Alex, so I can
Absolutely.
more information on that.
All right, well, we'll move along here. How do buyers' quality assurance needs change across various markets? So, for instance, how does quality assurance change from selling your product to a restaurant to selling your product to a distributor? Betsy, would you like to touch on that?
Sure. So in my experience, the quality assurance requirements by market are highly variable. Typically, if you're selling into a wholesale or a retail environment, such as a grocery store, you may have those markets require you to have a third-party audit, which is what they were talking about earlier when they were talking about GAAP certification. This is by no means universal, but if you're going to see a GAPS requirement, it is typically in these markets. Now, in terms of selling to restaurants, depending on if you're selling to a bigger, multifaceted type restaurant that has many outlets, you could see similar requirements. But some of the higher end independently owned restaurants will only require growers to have a food safety plan. They just want to know that the growers know what food safety practices are and that they've implemented them. We are seeing, even at the farmers market level, some farmers markets requiring food safety plans or requiring audits. Audits at the farmers market level would be a very, very rare thing to see. It's usually only at markets that are in very populated areas where there's a waiting list to get, to become a vendor there. But we are seeing an increase in markets that require growers to have food safety plans or have attended food safety training, such as good agricultural practices training.
Anybody else like to add anything to that?
No, I guess she got it all.
Okay. So kind of to go back to our last question, we had another question come in from one of our guests. How do we go about registering to attend a GAAP training?
Again, okay. So what GAAP, the third-party audit preparatory training that we have, is that what it is, or?
Just one of the, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, through the Food Systems Innovation. So it's uky.edu /FSIC, the Food Systems Innovation Center website. We'll have dates for the next training, next GAAP audit preparatory program there on the website. And if the person whoever asked you the question, if you can send an email, we can add them to the listserv and give them a heads up when the training date's announced.
Awesome, thank you. And I just wanted to remind all of our guests that there is a chat button in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, I believe, and you can use that to submit any questions that you would like answered throughout the webinar.
This is
Yeah.
Betsy. If you're interested in attending our Produce Safety Alliance training, again, you can visit the producesafetyalliance.cornell.edu website. The National GAPS program also has a collection of multiple day programs. They're not yet posted for winter, but they will be shortly.
Thank
And
you.
those are online, right, Betsy?
Oh, there's also a GAPS online course. Thank you, Annette. That's not what I was talking about. We have both online and in-person courses. Produce Safety Alliance is just in-person, but we do have GAPS programs that are both online and in-person.
And I'll make a plug. We're doing a Produce Safety Alliance grower training here in Tennessee on February 15th, and it'll be in Murfreesboro, which is just south of Nashville. So it'll be fairly local for Kentuckians as well. We're also doing a Train the Trainer the 2 days before that, so the 13th and 14th, if people are interested in training others.
Awesome. And we're putting all this information in the chat so that everybody has access to the websites and everything like that. So give that a look over and see if you can find any resources that'll help you out. How does management of the cold chain relate to both quality assurance and food safety? And what are some of the best cold chain management practices? Annette, would you like to touch on that?
Sure, I'll touch on that. So the cold chain is maintaining that cold chain from as soon as you can get something out of the field all the way till it gets to its end user is really critical from both the quality and the food safety perspective. From the quality perspective, it's going to give you the longest shelf life if you can remove that field heat. So as soon as you harvest something, like us, it's still respiring and that produces heat. And so you want to get that heat out, otherwise you're losing your nutrients and you're losing your quality, and it's going to not only shrivel faster, but it's going to decay faster as well. And that's where the food safety aspect comes in too. So if you have your produce stored at the proper temperature in a cooler or a room with a cool bot that's bringing down that temperature, that's going to prevent the proliferation or the growth of those foodborne illness pathogens as well. So it's going to slow down their growth. And that's really important from a food safety perspective. So the best thing you can do is harvest earlier in the morning if possible. I know that's not always possible when you're going to a farmer's market. The next morning, you sometimes harvest that afternoon before, but if you can harvest in the morning before that field heat builds up and then get that produce into a cooler as soon as possible, that'll help you from both the quality and the food safety side.
Great. Betsy, do you have anything you'd like to add there?
Only, well, as it relates to the Food Safety Modernization Act, there isn't a requirement for cold chain maintenance, but after you have a cold chain, you have to keep it in place. So there are some growers that don't have access to the cold chain, and so they don't use that technology. But as Annette pointed out, there are values from both safety and quality that come from using a cold chain.
Paul, would you like to add anything?
So yeah, the one thing that this is based out of all my trainings and that I'm bringing in different scenarios based on questions that I got. One thing that's important, like Annette mentioned, temperature is the #1 factor for cold chain. And just because the food is going to be either frozen or chilled, it doesn't mean it can be mishandled or handled carelessly. The initial microbial load is very important as to how the quality of the shelf life is going to extend, play in, and as time goes by. So some of the tips could be maintaining high levels of hygiene at all stages of the product's life, chilling or freezing the product quickly, just like Annette mentioned, and maintaining proper temperatures, either chill or frozen temperature. And most importantly, ensuring that chilled or frozen products are transferred in a continuous operation, like without stopping or delays, especially between temperature controlled areas. And examples could be from delivery truck to holding stores, or from storage areas to retail display units. that. And also from a consumer perspective, segregating cooked and uncooked, chilled or frozen products in storage, and also in the shelves, like retail display cabinets, segregating uncooked meats and ready-to-eat meat products. And also training all personnel to correct handling and the storage of chilled frozen foods. And also, most importantly, conducting frequent or as often as possible temperature checks on chilled and frozen, the equipment that's used. So, and using the appropriate calibrated instrumentation, or some of the key factors that can help in effective cold chain management.
I'll throw one more thing out there as well. So when we talk about cold chain, most fruits and vegetables, we want to get them as close to 32 as possible because that's going to maintain the longest shelf life. However, several of our vegetables will get what we call chilling injury. So if you stored them at 32 for any length of time, like a few days, you would start to see evidence of chilling injury. And probably the most widely known one and most common one is tomato. And we know that if we stick a tomato in the refrigerator, it's going to lose its texture and it's going to lose its flavor properties. So you don't want to be sticking your tomatoes in a 32-degree cooler. You don't want to stick your basil in there either. It'll turn black. And a lot of your cucurbit crops as well. So cucumbers and squashes, they'll tend to get what we call pitting. So you'll see pits in them if they're in cold storage for a long period of time. So if you're harvesting something for market and you're going to market in a few hours or the next morning and you just want to get that field heat out, it would be fine to stick anything at that temperature. But if you harvested things on Wednesday and you're going to market the following Monday and you're trying to save that produce, you don't want to put things that are chilling sensitive at 32 degrees or you're going to actually end up hurting your quality rather than helping it. So that's just something to be aware of too.
So where can I find out if a crop is like that? What, like if it needs to be put into cold chain management, or if it needs to stay above 32, or it's going to have some shelf life issues?
We actually have a publication that we did. I can send you the link for a couple of years ago, and it gives you a table of the best temperature by crop.
Sure, that works perfect, and I'll send that along with some additional information after the webinar. So we'll go ahead and move along. What are some of the unique risks associated with manufactured food products in comparison to fresh food products? So we've been talking a lot about produce growers and stuff like that, but some of our value-added graduates from MarketReady have wanted to know a little bit more about some of the risks associated with their manufactured products. So, Betsy, would you like to talk about that for a second?
Well, I think you picked unwisely with me, but in terms of manufactured food products, I think there's the issue of post-production contamination seems to create a lot of issues depending on what type of food you're talking about. There's also long-term storage issues when consumers use the product versus how long it's good for. Certainly when you talk about food production facilities, the necessity for cleaning and sanitation of equipment, not that we don't have that problem in fresh produce, but it's usually at a much different level of expectation. You get into more expectations in terms of the Food Safety Modernization Act. Manufactured foods fall under the Human Foods Rule, whereas fresh produce falls under Produce Safety Rule. So the regulatory expectations are quite different, and those differences in regulatory expectations are focused on some of those risks related to manufactured food products, that gets you into areas like environmental monitoring and other risks. So it sort of depends on what the manufactured food is in terms of what risks you would pull out and what pathogens of concern would be there.
Paul, do you have anything to add?
So, yeah, I think, well, I'll go with what Betsy said. I mean, she's covered it. But just to add, manufactured or processed food, the primary reason, the background is really important. The primary reason for manufacturing or processing is probably to extend the shelf life, or there could be other reasons like fortifying the product with different nutritive value, also adding different flavors, again, depending on what food product it is. So that's number one. And the number two is there has to be a clear understanding that pathogen is different from spoilage organism. When it comes to processed food, your pathogen and spoilage organisms are completely different. Processed spoilage, your spoilage organism is responsible for spoilage, which you can visibly see, like a mold on a bread or some different colored molds that appear on foods that are left out on the counter, or a spoilage of milk that you smell a milk that's spoiled, you can clearly tell it's spoiled. Whereas pathogen, you can't actually say it. The number of cells required for food to spoil is more, and in terms of pathogen, you need very few cells to infect or affect an individual and cause a foodborne illness. For that being said, for both fresh and processed or manufactured food, temperature is the number one factor that's important. Storing properly, cooking properly, and processing at the proper temperature. And uniquely for manufactured or processed food, like Betsy mentioned, post-production handling, which also could be termed as cross-contamination. Post-production could be a major risk factor for manufactured products. So interestingly, for value-added products, it's approached from two different departments. Your marketing department has to design a package to sell the product. Well, your food safety department also has to make sure the package is good and maintains integrity, preventing physical, chemical, or biological contamination, contaminants from entering the product.
Awesome. Well, we'll move along here. What are the current recommendations for new producers regarding moving towards FSMA compliance readiness? Annette, would you like to start?
We have an old building, so the heater just went crazy. I apologize for that very loud noise if everyone heard it. So current recommendations for new producers regarding moving towards FSMA compliance readiness. So if you fall under the exemption and you're a small producer, I think education is your best weapon, and making sure that you are trained in good agricultural practices. And so you're following all of those recommendations. And if you're a new producer who would fall under that FSMA rule, then going through the PSA training would be a good step to making sure you're up on all those regulations and you know which direction to go to. And that way you can see what things you can do immediately and what things are going to take your time and money to do and might take a little longer to get you in compliance. So just getting the education, both so you know what's in that rule and moving in that direction, would be the best things that a new producer could do, so you understand everything that's expected of you in the coming years.
Great. Paul, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that's I would do the same thing. That's okay.
I would, this is Betsy. I would love to jump in here and reiterate exactly what Annette just said. Even though there are exemptions and exclusions from the rule, I think it is very important for all growers to know what is in there, both from the impact it could have on them directly and the expectations that may come from buyers. The other thing I want to mention is that when guidance comes out, it will be in draft form. and there will be an opportunity for growers to comment on that guidance. And if they don't know what's in the rule and they don't take that opportunity to influence and share their thoughts about guidance that will guide implementation, they're missing a really valuable opportunity to influence what happens moving forward. So I think there's a lot of reasons for growers to have knowledge of what's in the rule and how it might impact them so that they can participate in that part.
Awesome. What is a mock recall and how does it work? And how do most buyers expect for producers to have done this? And any one of you guys can take the lead on this.
From a third-party GAAP audit perspective, I can say that before an auditor comes on the farm, the grower is expected to have done a mock recall. Of course, the first audit, they exempt it, but from the following audits, they want the grower to make sure they have a mock recall done with the buyer, and basically the ability to trace it backward and forward, and to check that the tracing system is in place. Basically testing how they've come up with labeling their container or lot leaving the facility. So that's one requirement from the third-party GAAP audit perspective. That is expected of the growers to have a mock recall before the stipulated time, decided by the auditor. Yeah.
So I'm gonna I guess we're making the assumption that all the participants know what a mock recall is. On the off chance that they don't, a mock recall is a way for growers to test their traceability system that they have in place. So can't have a mock recall if you don't have a traceability system in place. As was just mentioned, if you're going through a third-party audit, some audits require that you have a mock recall to make sure your system is working. The thing we stress with growers is that if they are going to do a mock recall, they should work with buyers who do expect it. You would expect that buyers that are requiring you to have a third-party audit should have the expectation that you might call them requesting information for a mock recall. Some buyers are very well set up to do this, and they will respond within 2 hours with how much they have in stock or how much was already sold. We do like to stress with growers to make sure that they make it clear that they're just testing their traceability system and that indeed it is a mock recall, and that they don't inadvertently worry a buyer that they're going through an actual recall.
Thank you. I just wanted to let everybody know that Annette has put in the storage temp resource into the chat.
And it looks like it doesn't actually have the link to it, so I will forward that on to you so you can send it out to everybody.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry about that.
Paul, did you have a question?
Oh yeah, I had a question for Betsy though. I mean, this is about the FSMA and GAAP. Since Betsy's been working with the regulatory FDA and USDA, I just wanted to ask about the future of FSMA as it stands. There are a list of other exemptions that's in place to exempt some growers, and that's on one side. On the other side, we do have a third-party GAAP program through the USDA and other third-party. So if a grower has to go through a FSMA training and have that requirement met, would that in future, what's the future of the GAAP audit? Do you see that kind of blending into the FSMA being the only requirement, or did USDA mention at all about the future of the GAAP third-party GAAP program and FSMA being together? Because most growers talk to me about them having to do both the training. So I have to do a third-party GAAP audit for my buyer, and I also have to do this as a federal requirement as a federal regulation. So is there a future that we can look at probably one program that would make easy on the growers, that if they do the FSMA at that level, at the large scale, they don't have to do the third party, or either way on the other side?
Okay, so I should preface my comments by saying I think my crystal ball is cracked.
Okay.
But I'll tell you some things that are happening and how that might sort itself out.
Okay.
First and foremost, I want to make it very clear that the Food Safety Modernization Act's produce safety rule does not require either a farm food safety plan or a third-party audit.
Right.
So neither of those are required, just to start there. We do know the USDA has said that they are working on aligning the harmonized audit with the new expectations in the Food Safety Modernization Act's produce safety rule.
Okay.
They have said that in the areas in the audit that do not currently address things that are in the produce safety rule, from here forward I'm going to say PSR,
Okay.
produce safety rule, they will increase the expectations or add those expectations into the audit.
Okay.
If the audit itself is already above the expectations outlined in the PSR, they will likely keep those expectations at a higher level because many people are already functioning there and they would not lower those expectations.
Okay.
So we know USDA has said that regarding the harmonized. I suspect other groups, other audit companies may take a similar approach to incorporating requirements in their audits to align with the regulatory requirements in the Food Safety Modernization Act's PSR. The other thing, how this will go internationally is, of course, we have the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. They're starting to roll out their training, I believe, in January. They will start the pilot training. And so there's a lot of things going on right now, and I think other things will sort out as we move forward. But I do envision that audits will be one way growers can sort of judge, hey, am I in compliance or not? If I pass it and it's aligned, that might be a good indication for me. But again, it will not be required of them.
Okay. Okay.
Well, thank you. So one more question just to kind of wrap things up. We have a blend of extension, other educators, and growers who will probably be interested in this question. So if I'm feeling overwhelmed by everything that's going on in the food safety world right now, and I'm a small scale grower, where do I start in all this? Do I need to seek out a training or get on USDA's website and try to go through all of their information? Just kind of give me an idea of where I should go first.
Yep. From Kentucky, if you're a grower in Kentucky, I would say doing the basic training that they have for the farmers market. GAAP training gives you an insight into what good ag practices is all about. So I would definitely start at that base level to understand GAAP first of all. And like Betsy mentioned, though you fall under FSMA, or you have to do a third-party GAAP audit or not, or doesn't matter, as long as you produce something that's being consumed by consumers, you have to understand what good ag practices is, and then you have to make sure you implement those at the best level possible on whichever farm scale you're working on.
Annette, would you like to add anything?
I think he covered it pretty well.
All righty. Well, I think that about wraps everything up. I really do want to thank Betsy, Annette, and Paul for being with us today and helping us present all of this information. I know that food safety is super important. But before we take off, I wanted to ask Paul, can you kind of explain a little bit of the role with with Kentucky's role with the Southern Food Safety Center that's based out of Florida? And can you kind of point some of our guests to the resources that can be found kind of through CCD, the Center for Crop Diversification here at UK?
Okay, to start with, I can start with Food Systems Innovation Center. So we primarily, first of all, trying to revamp the basic GAAP program. And not call it GAAP, as farm focused food safety for growers at the farmers market level. And the sampling certificate that the growers need to issue raw samples, they need, any grower doing that has to go through this training. So that's one thing that we're working on. So we probably have that training starting pretty soon. We're going to train the extension agents, and then have extension agents in turn train the growers on the new program, and they can get a sampling certificate. That's going to be the foundational GAAP program, Good Ag Practices program, and I also have the third-party GAAP, USDA GAAP preparatory program. That is for growers who want to graduate to the wholesale level, and they have a buyer requirement that they need to meet. And there's a one-day program going through the nuts and bolts of the audits, and we also have a GAAP certified farm on campus that we take the participants on a tour so they can understand the different implementation aspects of the GAAP, third-party GAAP audit, especially the USDA audit. So those are the two programs. Talking about the Southern Center, so we partnered with Florida to train growers. Basically, the training that PSA, Betsy was talking about, PSA is developed to train growers requiring who grows who fall under FSMA requirement. So we're also partnering Florida and other states in the southern region, the USDA southern region, to develop different resources for growers, and in terms of fact sheets and publications. And I think Betsy already spoke about tools, different tools that they have on their website, and we for growers to decide if they fall under the FSMA rule or not, and things like that. So the primary goal is to share resources through the Southern Center, and make this transition, or growers going to meet the FSMA requirement smooth and easy. And also we want to provide additional resources for growers requiring help with implementation of different aspects of FSMA after they finish that training as well.
Awesome. So again, I just want to thank Annette and Betsy for being here, and you, Paul, as well. And thank you to all the participants that could join us out there. I just wanted to let everybody know that a copy of this webinar will be on our Market Ready website underneath resources and our webinars tab. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook for more webinars and trainings coming up. And if you guys are looking for Betsy, Annette, or Paul's contact information, I have put them on one of the beginning slides, in addition to sending out a speaker bio in the registration email. So does anybody have any parting words they'd like to add in?
Thanks for having us.
Yep, thanks for the
Thank you.
opportunity.
It was our pleasure. We really appreciated it.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Bonk, bonk.
Thank you.
Sorry, gobble,
Happy
gobble.
Thanksgiving.
On holiday.